While we're talking about the water system in your house, I want to show you some innovative thinking. Al Warnament, he's superintendent of $1 million building renovation, and got to know him there. And he was telling me about his geothermal unit and how he has his system set up. Now he's got his pressure tank here feeding into this 50-gallon tank for freshwater system after it goes through the softener. And he relies on his geo unit, his echo unit from his geothermal to heat all the water in his house. And he pumps it out of the geothermal into the top of this 50-gallon water heater. And then it comes out of here into another 50-gallon water heater. Now he's got a breaker box hooked to this 50-gallon water heater, but he says he don't even turn it on. He has absolutely no electric heating his water heaters. They're basically storage tanks. So the water comes in here, the cold line goes like it usually would on its route, but the hot line basically comes out of here, comes over here, goes up into the furthest faucet or unit that draws heat. So clear to the other side of the house, this is all solid line, and the heat rises through here and it forces the heat to go through this closed loop. And then here at the furthest point, he starts tapping in with the sink faucets, and on the return route, the shower, a hot water shower, other faucets on the return line. And basically that means by the time the water cools down and the pressure of the water and the heat of the water shoots things out and circulates, it comes back to the bottom of these water tanks. He's got a drain that's able to drain away. But basically it's a closed heating loop. His hot water drains away in the sinks like they usually do and everything, but if it's not being used, all of this to the furthest part of the house is hot water that's generated out of this echo unit on his geothermal. And all the lines, faucets and sinks and showers are hooked up. Washing machines are on the return line. Cold water supply lines are normal to faucets wherever they're at. They just drain back into the drains like they usually do. No need to return the cold water back to the system. So it's just a closed loop with the hot water. I was sitting down talking to our plumbing expert at this building renovation, Brad. He works for R.A. Flynn, and he's been around a long time, and he knows a heck of a lot about water systems. And before Al came over to us, I was saying, well, what do you think of this, Brad? And he was saying, well, he said, number one, he's probably going to have a pump on there. And I told Brad, I says, we've talked about that. And when he had a pump that circulated water, he says it didn't work. He got frustrated, turned it off, went to Cabela's and bought some fishing rods and went fishing. And his wife called him while he was fishing and said, what'd you do to this? And he says, well, I just turned that pump off. And she says, everything in the house is working very well now. The hot water's everywhere where it's supposed to be. And since he turned the pump off, everything works real well. So he took the circulating pump out. So I told Brad, I says, well, let me tell the story on that. And he says, well, it just might be a workable system and everything. Then Brad says, well, in the wintertime, the echo unit is going to be taking the heat out of the water lines, the liquid lines. On my house, I got 437 feet of geothermal lines. And in the summertime, the air conditioning takes the coolness out of the line and rejects the heat into the water system. He says the water system may not work that well in the wintertime. And just then Al walked up and I said, well, here's what Brad thinks of your system here. And he says in the wintertime there is a little weakness on things, and he'll turn his breaker box on occasionally just to boost the heat up a little bit because it's not functioning like it does in the summertime where it takes the heat out of the liquid and puts it into the water heaters. But he says it still works really good, and you don't have to turn that breaker box on sometimes at all in the winter time. Just like all geothermals, you get 0 degrees for a week or two, and that really makes the geothermal unit work a little harder. In fact, Al said that he separated a line in his thermostat that kicks in the auxiliary heater for his house because he thought the auxiliary heater was really a high energy use. And he says they just put sweaters on in those times where it gets 0 degrees outside for weeks at a time, and it's comfortable. But you can look this over. It's a kind of out of the box, unique thinking. I don't know if Al had ideas from somewhere for this, or whether he came up with it by himself. He's a pretty sharp cookie. But when you go to put your water system in and your furnace in, again, I would think twice about putting a regular furnace in. I would go geothermal. I think from the second unit I've had in 2 houses, and both of them perform very well, and no maintenance, and the water furnace brand is excellent. So you look this over on this water system. You can think about it. Go to your professional plumbers, see what they think. By the time Al was done explaining things to Brad was nodding his head, scratching his chin and saying, well, if he says it works, it must work, because Al's a pretty straightforward guy and a pretty sharp guy. But you can see the system here. You may consider this for your house if you're building a new house.